All right, well, thank you, everybody. I'm Macedonio Lanis. I'm from Monterrey, Mexico. And I am one of those people who is not necessarily on the computer science field. My background is computer science. I did my later work on information systems, on the issue of computers and business. And my talk is about forecasting the future. How is the future of blockchain going to look like? And the first thing is, how do you see the future? And I said, well, when you get a PhD, you learn how to see the future. And you get those skills. Let me just give you an example. Today is Sunday. I can see that tomorrow is going to be Monday. And this is December. Next month is going to be called January. Now, if you can see what happens is there are some cycles. I'm cheating. If you can learn from those cycles, you can see the future because the cycles generally repeat. And my job is to look at those cycles in industry and find if those cycles will apply to different technologies. And in this case, it looks like blockchain is going to follow the same cycles as pretty much all the technology that we have. The first thing is, why do we need a strategy for taking advantage of blockchain? And the first part has to do with the field that I worked on. I'm not, as I said, a typical computer scientist. I work on information systems. And the definition of information system, that's a formal definition. Integrated user-machine system for providing information to support operations, management, and decision-making functions in organization. My job is to give people information so they can make better decisions. Now, when you add people to the equation, everything falls down. Because people think different. People think first, and everybody thinks differently. And the human mind plays tricks on people. If you don't believe me, do an example. No, don't do it tonight. Do it, later on. Draw the outline of your left hand if you're right-handed. And then, without looking at your right hand, write the lines that you have on your right hand in that picture. And I bet that you won't be able to draw the lines that you have on your hand without looking at them. Because the things that we do every day, we don't see. And just like that, there are tons of tricks that mind plays on us. And when that happens in the real world, there are some applications that work perfectly in one industry and fail miserably in another. And there are some things that come in fast, and there are things that come in very slow. And knowing how the human brain works, knowing how businesses work, can help us take advantage of this or make money. I have an exercise, but it's going to take like one of my precious minutes. I'll probably take it. It makes sense. I'm going to put 20 numbers in here. Put your eyes on number 1. Then find number 2, 3, 4 until you get to 20. I'm going to see how long it takes you to find them, just as an exercise. We have to be very, very quick because I don't have that much time. So let's see. Ready? Go. When you get to the 20, raise your hand. Okay, 25 seconds. That's not too bad. For this time of day. Now I'm going to do something else. I'm going to draw a line in the middle. Number 1 is on top. Number 2 is in the bottom. Number 3 is on top. Number 4 is on the bottom. So go back to number 1 and start now. That's much faster. That's 20 seconds. You see 5 seconds better. One last time, and I promise that will be last one. I'm going to draw a vertical line. Number 1 is here. Number 2 is down right. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. So put your eyes on number 1 again, and go. That's pretty good. 15 seconds. You consistently did 5 seconds better with more help that you were getting. Now, what is the lesson to be learned from this exercise? Number 1, everybody can eventually find a solution. If you work hard, you will find a solution. Bitcoins will come and go, no matter how much we work for it. And eventually somebody will find a solution and it'll appear there. But if you work hard and also know the theories involved, if you know how this thing behaves, then you can probably take a 1 second or 2 second advantage over your competitors. And if you know the theories and you also have the right strategy and you're willing to work hard, there will be nobody that can beat you. So there's a value in knowing all these theories. There's a value in all the things that we do in academia, even if it's not in computer science. Now, 2 theories that I want to share with you. Number 1 is how technologies evolve. Generally, when technologies first appear, they have no value. They're nice toys. First time people see Google Earth, they say, oh, it's a nice thing. First thing they do is they find their house. Second thing they do is they go, wow. Because it's amazing to see your house in Google Earth, but there's no money there. And then after a while, somebody realizes that there's some money in that technology, and they start taking advantage of the technology. It becomes a packing technology, it's something interesting. And say, well, Google Earth can be used to show hotels or to show restaurants or to sell real estate. And then it becomes an interesting technology. Eventually, it becomes a key technology. Those who have it have an advantage over those who don't. And your job is to ride this wave as soon as it becomes a key technology, because eventually it will become a base technology. Everybody would have Google Earth. Everybody uses that technology. Nobody gets an advantage. As a matter of fact, it's a disadvantage not to have it. So all technologies evolve from not being important to being interesting to being very, very important to not being important again, because everybody has that technology. So eventually things will become base technologies. The thing is, this cycle can last 10 days. This cycle can last 1,000 years or 100 years. How long Bitcoin will be a key technology, we don't know. My guess is that it's here. It's demonstrated value, and it's becoming a key technology in some industries, not all of them. And the thing is, if you get into that wave soon enough, you can make the money. Eventually, there will be no more money on this because it will be a base technology. The second one has to do with innovators. How do people react to innovation? And there are some studies that show that there are different types of people. Now, if you are a pioneer, those who try everything in technology, you're probably not a pioneer in fashion or a pioneer in different fields. You can be a pioneer in something very particular. There are some people who are waiting in line to buy the latest version of the iPhone for 3 days, but they don't have the latest fashion. And there's people who go to Paris to find the last fashion, but they don't care about cell phones. People have different cycles for different things. This curve was first developed for the use of pesticides with farmers, but then we saw that it applies to other fields. It does apply to blockchain use as well. So we have pioneers. They look for everything. Now, the problem with pioneers is that 9 out of everything. Am I out of time already? Okay. All right. So I'll just give you the last. But the thing is, if we know how these things behave, we know that we have to react differently depending on where in the curve is. In the beginning, we have to push. Then we have to share. Then we have to control. Last slide is, if you work hard, you can find the solution. If you work hard and know the theories, there is value on that. So get close to science, look at the university and see what we have been doing in not just computer science, but other fields. Thank you.
So hi everyone, my name is Nama. I'll be telling you about how to solve consensus in the message and memory model. And this is joint work with many people from many different places, but I worry that if I tell you all of their names, I'll run out of time. So, yeah. So, in general, this model that I'll be talking about is motivated by new technology, which is called remote direct memory access. And this is technology that is coming in data centers. So you can think of an application where you have many machines, and they're connected over a message passing network. And so this is the network right there. And to tell you about this technology, let me zoom in on I guess 2 of these machines and tell you a little bit about how message passing works right now. So you have a machine has a CPU that's connected to the memory, and it has a network interface card that lets you send messages across the network. And so if a CPU wants to send a message, it'll forward it to the NIC, which will forward it across the network to the other NIC and to the other CPU. Now this whole new remote direct memory access, which is this exciting technology, all it does is it gives this connection between the NIC and the memory. And so now, if I want to send a message to another computer, I can forward it through the NIC, but this time avoid the CPU of the other machine. Okay, and so this is all that the new technology does, but what it gives us is an abstraction where previously we only had message passing capabilities, and now we can also access somebody else's memory. And the significance here is that we did not touch the CPU of the other machine. And so if the CPU is slow or crashed, it doesn't matter for us. We can still communicate just as well. And so we abstract this in order to do some theory on it. We abstract it as a model where we have a message passing network that is fully connected. And on top of that, we have a shared memory graph. And I'll be using these blue edges to signify the memory graph. And the reason that we have an incomplete graph is that this technology actually, you have to predefine who you're connected to before you can use it. And so it's not actually an automatic connection to everybody. So we have this other graph on top.
You say shared memory, it means also you can read it.
You can read and write.
You can
Yeah.
also read.
Yes.
Not only write.
Yes. Okay, and so now I'll be talking about how to solve consensus in these kinds of networks. And just to make it very clear, this work only considers benign crash failures. So unlike the Byzantine sort of faults that we've been talking about. And just to make sure we're all on the same page, when I say consensus, I mean that everybody in my network wants to agree. If people who are crashed don't respond, that's fine. Now, there are known results about the two models, message passing and shared memory in isolation. And I'm talking about the asynchronous case where you have some randomization or maybe you have partial synchrony. And in this case, it's known that in message passing, you need a majority of the participants in order to solve consensus. And in shared memory, you can solve consensus with just one process. And so our goal for the work, it will be to increase the fault tolerance of message passing using a little bit of shared memory. And the reason we want to use a little bit is that these shared memory connections are not very scalable. And so if one person has to communicate with many others through the RDMA shared memory, it becomes very slow. For some reason, it stopped working. Crashed, yeah. Yeah, okay. All right. So I'll tell you the high-level idea that we're going to do is take a message passing algorithm that we already know works, but that has tolerance of half, of like n over 2, and replace the messages that it sends with actually a list of messages, in which we basically, each process sends a list of this is my message and this is my neighbor's message through the shared memory graph. And the intuition is that what you do is over shared memory, you run consensus that can tolerate any number of failures, and then you broadcast what the result of that consensus through the messages. And so in this case, we're basically simulating our shared memory neighbors with these messages. And so the original algorithm with just message passing, if we have half of the processes that are dead, there's nothing we can do. Whereas in our message and memory model, or M&M, if we have, say, this failure pattern, then these three processes are definitely alive because, well, they are. And we can also represent the shared memory neighbor of someone who is alive. And so in this case, we can actually solve consensus. And the problem is that if we have a different failure pattern, we have less shared memory neighbors that we can represent. And so we actually, in this case, we don't have a majority and we can't solve consensus. And so this really depends on who in our graph are the correct processes. And the problem is that the adversary controls this. And so what we do is we use expander graphs, which are, expander graphs are basically graphs that are very highly connected. And if I say a graph has high expansion, what I mean is that every subset of its vertices is connected to many neighbors. And so you can think of this subset of vertices as our correct people. And if they have many neighbors, then they can simulate many people, and we can tolerate more failures. And so in our paper, we formalize this. We give an algorithm and we give a lower bound that basically says expansion is sort of the right measure, and the optimal fault tolerance improves if the expansion of your shared memory graph is high. And yeah, that's basically all I wanted to tell you. We have the message and memory model, and on top of that, we show that consensus can be solved with high expansion. That's it. Yeah.
When a processor fails, it's only the CPU? Or
Yeah,
also
so
the
we-
memory?
Yeah, so we assume the CPU fails and the NIC remains alive.
That's it. The memory you still
Yes,
access it.
this work assumes that the memory. We have follow-up work that doesn't, and I can talk to you about that later. Yes? In where? I don't know that. Right, so we can, so I'm not aware of that work, but we can show that this kind of model also works for RDMA, for Byzantine failures, because we have the shared memory that kind of allows you to prevent a Byzantine process from telling different things to different people. Basically, everybody can see the shared memory, and so they can't lie too much.
And I took a question that this really reminds me of the work that was kind of critical networks or was it network-based spending tree algorithms. I couldn't really see why the new formalism is necessary.
Okay, sure.
Do I need a mic or? Yes. All right. Never had one of these before. So, hi, my name is Itai. I'm from the Technion, and this is a joint work with my PhD advisor, whose name is also Itai. And the mandatory joke is that we spell it differently. And we also had Itai Abraham speak today, who also spells it differently, but it's the same in Hebrew, so don't worry.
Why the Italian use a double T?
Why he spells it like that? I don't know. This is the right way, obviously. But I can only say that because he isn't here. And actually, it's a biblical name, and the actual version is like Itai Abraham's, which is a double T and an I, but this is really off topic. So, never mind. The gap game. This is our work that was published in CCS, the last CCS. It's about mining incentives when transaction fees are dominant. So, 6 minutes, let's go. Mining scenario, right? We have this block, number 94, and now a miner looks at the blockchain and has to decide what he wants to do. So we see is, yeah, the protocol says that if I mine a block, I'm going to get 5 new coins. This is like the 12.5 bitcoins nowadays. And currently there are no transactions that offer any fees. And we can have an estimation of how much electricity it's going to cost us to find a block. So we're going to estimate the electricity with 4 coins, and the expected profit is 1 coin. So that makes sense to mine. So let's start mining. And we went for some time, but we still haven't found a block. And now some transactions have been introduced to the system, and they offer fees. So, So now the available fees are 1 coin. So yeah, let's recalculate our block. We're gonna get more profit now by including these transactions. And our expected profit is gonna be of 2 coins. So we keep on mining, and the process keeps on going, and more transactions are introduced, and we keep on going until we find a block, and we're happy. So what we got is this immediate mining process, right? We found the block, we immediately start mining for the next one. So what we do in this work? Nice. Well, the first thought was that fees are going to be more dominant than they are today, for 2 reasons. One, as the currency gets more popular, we're gonna want more transactions, right? So we're gonna have a congestion, and transactions offer more fees. And the second is more like Bitcoin specific. We have limited supply of coins, right? Every 4 years, the amount of coins minted halves. So transactions make up more volume of the reward for miners. So let's revisit the scenario, but this time with dominant fees or not enough minting, let's call it this way. So in this scenario, only 1 coin will be generated from block. Our expected expenses are the same. Doesn't make sense to mine, right? We're gonna lose money by mining. So we're not gonna mine, obviously, we're gonna wait. And some transactions were introduced to the system and they offer fees, but that's still not enough because our expected profit is 0. We don't like to work for free. So we keep on waiting and wait some for more time, and more transactions are introduced. And eventually, now it's profitable to mine, so let's start mining. And then we find the block, and it's all good. And please notice, we got the same profit, right? It was 3 coins in either scenario, but in this one, we're mining for really short time. So we get this notion of mining gaps, stops in mining. And this was postulated by a work by the Princeton group and was published in CCS 16. But they were talking about a model which had no meaning at all, just fees, and they had the assumption of unbounded blocks, which is kind of unrealistic. And that's what gave us the idea for the mining gap. Where do these gaps start? And what are their implications? Spoiler, it's a lot closer than we think. So, really in a brief way, we have this model of cryptocurrency that considers both the minting and the fees, the expenses for, yes?
You assume that the fee does not change?
We assume that fees are introduced to the system in a linear manner. This is based on a measurement that we did, but I took out because we didn't have time for that. But it's in the paper. And we also model the hardware expenses and the electricity expenses. And we model this as a game of miners wanting to optimize their profit. And their strategy is basically when to mine and when to stop mining. And the main thing is that miners are rational. They want to optimize their profits. So we get this gap game. When should I mine? When should I stop? And thankfully, we get an equilibrium point. I'll run through the results because I don't think we have much time. So basically, this graph, don't read the values. It doesn't matter. It just means all of these points are specific scenarios for given parameters. And this is the best scenario when we have a lower gap. This is the gap size. So we want to be here. But the more the fees are dominant and the more centralized the system, we're actually going to get to this point, which in Bitcoin means 8-minute gaps out of the 10. That's an extreme scenario, but this is the most extreme one. And also another interesting result that we got is the centralization. That means that in this game, miners are better off joining forces and becoming a coalition of stronger miners. And by doing so, they manage to increase their profit by more than twice, for example. So 2 small miners decided to join forces, and they actually increased their profit by something that is greater than the added size. We took everything and threw it on the Bitcoin model. We took Bitcoin parameters and threw it into the model. And in a rough estimation, we get that in about 10 years, we're going to have a 20% gap. That means in 10 years, 2 minutes would be no mining, and then 8 minutes on average for mining. And to conclude, model and analysis of rational miners' behavior, mining gaps. Obviously, we don't want mining gaps. It means the system is less secure. Centralization, the Bitcoin scenario, and please check out the link for the paper. Thank you. Do you have time for questions?
You can do one question.
If you have 2 minutes without mining, that means the price of the block goes down. Is that a model? The mining price?
The mine. Yes, of course. This is a key part of the model. The miners forfeit chances to find a block to increase their utility by decreasing their expenses. Yes. You would actually lose money by doing that. You're going to pay for electricity, and even if you find a block, it's not going to be worth the electricity you paid for. We have time for one. Yeah. Sorry? So you're suggesting to fork the last block in a sense to get more reward from fees, right? So no, we haven't, but these guys did. This is most of their paper, right? This is a great paper about that. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else want to give it? So seriously, if you want.
Essentially a classical Byzantine agreement. And the idea is that I have my quorums and you have your quorums, and you cannot rely on my quorums and I cannot rely on your quorums. So suppose that we have just each processor has a list of quorums, and now we have the property somehow that if I take quorum of one participant and quorum of another participant, they will intersect. So I know now that on such a system we can implement shared memory. Now we can implement shared memory if we have failures. If we have failures that are just fail stop. But now suddenly we get also failures that are Byzantine. And if we have failures that are Byzantine, we have a problem which is safety. If we have two quorums that intersect in one position, if we have shared memory and this guy just doesn't talk, we will not make different decisions. But if we have a Byzantine processor in the intersection, the Byzantine processor can present one result to one quorum, another result to another quorum, and it happens that all the rest support the result that he shows, he points here, and all these support the result he's showing here. So it causes network disconnection between these two guys that has the quorums, and you cannot decide. But the fact that these two people cannot decide should not affect everybody. Perhaps there are, if you give me a set of Byzantine nodes, they affect some pairs and they cannot decide, but I'm interested that is there still a group that is there that can decide, that can, they will issue a decision and they don't know what is the group, but it will happen that within this group they will have together a good decision. Now, there are people outside the group. So what is sort of the idea of Stellar? The idea of Stellar is we expect that those people that will be in those pairs that will be unsafe and will decide different will be a small fraction of the participants. And the main participant, unbeknownst to them, actually will reach a consensus and will continue to reach a consensus so that we will have an overwhelming majority that continue to implement what people call it blockchain or replicated state machine or things like that. So this is the main idea, which now says essentially what I said, that something that I it's 30 years of that the notion of all correct processors will decide is not anymore valid because we have asymmetry. When we have quorums which are symmetric, your quorums are my quorums, it's impossible that I will be in a group that decide and somebody else which is correct will reach a different decision because it's all symmetric. Once we introduce this asymmetry, we get a new thing, which is what is the biggest group that still can decide without knowing who is the group or anything like this. So the other question is, what is the idea of Stellar? How do they produce these quorums, which are my quorums? I know about your quorums. I don't know. I know about my quorums. I don't know about your quorums, and I'm not using this. I'm not using them. And essentially, there is implicit idea behind Stellar that the system is sort of an hierarchical, and the top of the hierarchy sits some huge federal reserves of different countries or stellar, and they call themselves Federated Byzantine Agreement, which is essentially eventually we have a group, but we don't know what is the group or anything like this. What we know is when you connect to the system, you are a client. You say, I have an account in Wells Fargo, but I'm afraid Wells Fargo was cheated. So, but I also buy a lot in Target. Excuse me that I'm using American example. I also buy in Target. I'm a member of another company, so I will trust. I suppose that I have 3 big institutions that I have relations with, and I will take this big institution, and in my opinion, no 2 of them will cooperate to be Byzantine. And at a time, only 1 of them will be compromised. So I trust any combination of 2 out of the 3. So if I take now and say, I will define slices, and each slice will be, let's say, A, B, B, C, and C, A. What do I know? I know that if I see 2 of them saying the same thing, voting or saying the same thing, I can trust this because 1 of them is not compromised. Okay? But if I have a bad guy, A may say different things than B, so I cannot do, but if A say different than B, it neutralize this slice and this slice. So this one will be live, so I get liveness, I get safety and liveness. Now, what will be now a quorum? These are huge companies. These huge companies will go to other bigger companies, and this transitive relation will create a quorum. And this is the idea. It's an implicit quorum. I don't know ahead of time what is the quorum. People broadcast their slices, and then I can know what is the quorum.